We see ourselves. Yes. Nice. Nice. Okay, I see myself. Hello, Thomas. How are you doing? Okay. But I saw already that he's on the Teams meeting, so it might take a second for him to show up. Ah, here he is. Hello, Brant.
Hello.
Hello.
How's everybody? It's good morning for me, but I guess you guys are good evening for you, yeah? Good afternoon?
Good afternoon, yes. Yeah, almost evening, yeah. So you have the pleasure to have the closing talk today here. Yeah, and
Great.
we're really excited, yeah, Brand. Super cool to have you here. Brand.
Well, I wish I was there in person, but this is good also.
Yeah, next time we fly you over.
Okay.
Brand, let me tell a couple of words about a couple of thoughts, before you start into your talk, okay? So,
Yes.
15 years ago, I was in San Francisco doing my MBA. Like, I'm really that old, yeah. And believe it or not, but back then I didn't hear about lean startup, design thinking, business model canvas, jobs to be done, none of that. I didn't hear anything of that. And you know why? Because it was just not invented. Like if you think like lean startup, I think it was written 2007, 6, something like that. Brand, when was it? Something like that, right?
And my book was the first one that I wrote. Wrote the first book about that was 2010. Eric's book wasn't until 2011.
See, look at that. Even later than I thought.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And basically all these mental models we also have in the product masterclass are just evolved in the last 15 years. So we have a totally different picture about how we approach new products, new businesses, which is it's incredible because it didn't change for a very long time. For 100 years we had Taylorism, everything was the same, but in the last 15 years it just exploded, and we have new tools, new approaches, new thinking, and that is actually really, really excited. And Brand is really one of the first persons who jumped into this evolving field. Right? He wrote one of the earliest book about lean startup, and it was a New York Times bestseller. And what's really exciting about him is that he's since then always kept being in the same field of innovation, right? So I'm really proud to have him here as a legend of the lean startup movement, and I could actually call him a dinosaurus of the innovation management, yeah? Because he's really knows all the details and the whole history. So I'm really looking forward to his talk about the human side of transformation. Please welcome Brant for his talk.
Thanks so much for that, Thomas. I love the personal intro, and one that doesn't really have to talk about me very much because that's not what it's about. It's really about can we build products that provide value for human beings in the world, and I think that that's really what this movement is about. And I think it's one of those things, I'll talk about this a little bit today, that we have to remain vigilant about. In other words, we have to make sure that with all of the evolutions of all of the frameworks and all of these great tools, that we keep in mind what our purpose is as product people, which is to improve people's lives. And so, to be honest, it's not fair to pretend that we did invent this. These movements really came out of looking at how successful startups were already functioning and differentiating them between startups that tended to fail. And so, the genius of Eric Ries's book is really putting the language around it and making it more teachable. But then it took all of us in the lean startup world a few years to really discover that, well, human-centered design has been around for decades, and they did a lot of this stuff too, and a lot of the empathy work. and decision-driven planning is another model that was used. So there's people that thought about these things before. Silicon Valley always pretends that they have to, that they're reinventing everything. And there's some goods and some bads to that. The bads is that it takes us a while to give credit to where credit is due. The good side of it is that approaching things from a blank slate, from a chalkboard that's empty, really allows you to do thought experiments and to try to cover things in different ways. And I think you end up coming up with new insights and new ways of teaching it that actually are what advances the ideas around those things. And the fundamental question that we were asking back in the early mid-2000s was, why do we teach startups to look like big businesses? These are all digital startups. Why are we talking and telling these digital startups that they need to start acting like these big, huge companies that were struggling even with the first wave of digital transformation, but we're also often struggle with launching, real new products or new growth opportunities? And so that was really one of the most fundamental questions of starting all of this lean startup stuff was, and we very quickly then brought it into the enterprise world. So it's kind of an interesting evolution. And I was an old product manager, and I always felt I was the CEO of the company, or not the CEO of the company. Well, I kind of did that too, but that's a different story. But certainly the CEO of the products, and it was the right place for this combination of human-centered design and agile practices without worrying about whether we're doing, full implementations of agile and rapid experimentation and lean startup techniques. The right place for that to be centered, in my opinion, was the product management team. And so I love talking to product people because I think that they've embraced those principles. And I think that there's still challenges to get them implemented, because I think a lot of leaders don't really know how to manage people that are doing that kind of work. And we can talk about that a little bit today. But I think it's super important that we focus on the human side of what we're doing, because that's why we're doing it. So why don't I'll jump right in here. So we live in an age, this is no mystery to anybody in the room, we live in an age of increased complexity and uncertainty. We're massively interconnected globally. The speed of information and disinformation continues to accelerate around this global connectedness. No arguments, right? And so I have it's kind of like a little parable. Customers are more agile. They're more agile than we are. Customers have their tips at all sorts of information. They have dozens, if not hundreds of choices. They're inundated with information, so we're competing just even for their mind space, let alone product features and benefits. They read social media, they can read review sites, they can change their minds overnight. There's not the brand loyalty that existed back in the middle of the industrial age. Back then you used a particular soap detergent because your mom always used that soap detergent. And that's not the case anymore. Now you want to know that it's green and it's hyperallergenic and there's not a crazy perfumes in it. And there's all sorts of things that have to be taken into consideration. And if as a business you don't have that, you change your mind. So the whim of the customer in itself causes disruption. But so imagine the 20th century, the early 20th century, and here's a picture of Henry Ford's assembly line, and he's famous for it having said, "You can have this car in any color you want as long as it's black." So he did not invent the car, of course. There were all sorts of cars that existed beforehand, and he didn't really completely invent the assembly line. He was borrowing from agriculture and from sewing, clothing manufacturing industries. But his goal was that can he create a product that's only one product, no models, no options, one color? Can he create that so efficiently that the middle class can buy a car? and it changed the world. It disrupted the world. And so you mentioned, Thomas, the science of management. This was the peak of science of management. And so you design the assembly line, and then you design the rest of the business to be an extension of the assembly line. So all the white collar workers were assembly line people too, as well. They lived in their own functions. They produced their marketing material the same way. They produced how they were going to sell it, distribute it, how they were getting parts. All of that was in their own function, and it was all very linear. But it didn't really matter if it was very linear, because you could just get everybody to execute harder and you would produce more output. And so the bellwether measurement for how well a company functioned was financial efficiency. Do I get more product out for every dollar of materials I put in? And it's important for you to remember those points. Efficiency is measured by producing the product such that the middle class could buy it, and it worked, right? His mission was building cars that worked. Get people from point A to B faster than a new horse. When you jump into the 21st century, here's a picture of Tesla's. What's missing from this picture? There's no human beings. We're getting to the point that products really can become almost infinitesimally customizable. Think about digital fabrication. You sit at your computer and choose what model sneaker that you want, in what color, with what laces, with what size, shape, whatever you want. And we're even getting that way with cars, because now having all of those different options and all those models and all those things, it doesn't matter because of the way it's been automated. So I want you to imagine the difference between a company that is using the science of management to optimize the efficiency of building the same exact thing as many times as possible, to this ability to manufacture almost anything just as easily, just as efficiently. So in Henry Ford's day, they faced technical risk. Can I build the product? Do we have the technology to be able to build this? And you faced operational risk. Can we produce this in such a way that the middle class can buy it? In today's world, there is very little technical risk. We pretty much know that we can build it. I'm not saying it's easy. It costs a lot of money, but we kind of know we can do it. And obviously, there's some industries, AI and the robotic stuff has a long ways to go. And there's a lot of stuff in life sciences and health sciences that require invention, and it's not easy. And we don't know if we can do some of those things in healthcare. But by and large, most companies either do not have to invent technology, or they know that they can. So this is the digital revolution that we're talking about. The digital revolution has brought all this on. The connectivity, the speed of information, that customers are more agile and intelligent, and that we can produce an infinite number of variations of products. That's the digital revolution. That's why I like to separate it from the industrial revolution. I don't like to call it the fourth wave of the industrial revolution, because I want to focus on the word digital. It's all the zeros and ones that made this possible. So the crazy thing to think about, in my view, is let's look at the way we manage those companies, right? So at the industrial age pyramid org management, top down, hierarchical, command and control. Information lives at the top of the company, but they're not getting really new information in. Their experience is what got them up to the top of the pyramid. One-way communication, down. And it made sense. if you had figured out how to build this car operationally so that middle class could afford it, and it was a perfect car every time it rolled off, and you knew how to market it and sell it and distribute it and get the parts to it, then you built an organization of people that could do those things without making mistakes, and you hired layers and layers of management in order to make sure that those people were doing those things without mistakes. It was the most efficient way to run a business. But here's where we live now. We've got the same structures of our companies, and now we've got what I call endless disruptions. Cyber attacks, social media knowledge, information flowing to customers, whether it's true or not, misinformation, economic collapses, inflation coming around the corner, war, supply chain collapse, pandemic. Everybody remember that? So any organization that believes that what they're going to do is wait for the new normal, it's already here. This is the new normal. These things have always existed around the globe, but they existed like the chaotic butterflies in the Amazon flapping their wings that's going to cause chaos on the other side of the world, maybe. These things now, once in pockets around the world, always now ripple across all economies and ripple across all of our businesses. And so the question becomes, are we managing our companies correctly? Are we managing our work correctly? And really the biggest question I have is measuring purely for efficiency. Does that make sense? So in other words, you've got all of these disruptions coming. Customers are changing their mind. You've got infinite number of models and colors and options. They can change their minds. Social media is telling you this and that. Pandemic comes and changes everybody's buying patterns. Should we still just be waiting for the people at the top to tell us what to do? Should we still just execute on the way it was the most efficient yesterday, even though it's all changed today? I mean, the answer is pretty clear that that's no. And so this is the biggest dilemma, that we can build products, we can make them operationally efficient, but we don't know what products to build. We don't know if we should build the products. We don't know what options that they need. We don't know the market sizes. We don't know if we're going to be able to get the supplies from our supply chains. I was part of a treatment plan at a healthcare system here in San Diego in 2021. And there was a cyber attack. I could not get my radiation treatments because of a cyber attack. So they've shut down all of the IT systems. So what's going to happen if somebody decides to go and do a cyber attack on 2 or 3 hospitals, or go to a region that only has 1 hospital? And people can't get their most fundamental care because, well, building a redundant IT system or a system that could have all of those medical procedures offline and still function, that's an overhead cost. And I'm no longer doing that financially efficient anymore. So we're still using this model of, can I get more widgets out for a set number of inputs, even though it might mean that I can't provide the value that I'm signed up for, the reason why I'm in business. Seems crazy to me, but we're just like still right in the midst of this, right? We're right in it. You just read all of the economists in the US, and it's all about austerity again and about financial efficiency. And it's all as if the economy is creating widgets. But that's not what the economy is doing. It's a wide variety of products. And even those that are producing widgets who can't produce widgets anymore because of supply chain issues and ransomware attacks and all of these other type of things, is that really efficient? I would answer no. So I think a lot of people have realized this, and over the years have been trying to come up with solutions, but they all become implemented top down. I was reading all about safe implementations of Agile a few weeks ago, and the whole program sounded awesome. It adhered to Agile principles. It was really designed, I think, to solve some of these problems. But then when I got to the section that talked about how they believe it should be implemented, it was top down. And there's no examples of top down implementations working. It's missing a fundamental point about human behavior, right? So you can look at here's our transformation bingo. And believe me, I use these words, some of them. But like, I'll design this into a real game at some point so we can do a talk where we actually play bingo. But all of these words are thrown around in top-down implementations. And by now, you realize that what really the change program just becomes another reorg. And it's really about just cutting costs, which means the lower level workers, maybe some middle managers, and everybody else just, hiding behind whatever wins they had in order to survive, trying to lay low. And it's interesting that if you do that during times of low labor or more labor power, what happens? Big quit. People adamantly not returning back to the office. Why do people adamantly not want to return to the office? Because they realized that they could get their job done in half the time. So they come into the office, they have to do 2 hours of commute, they have to come into the office for 8 hours. They don't get to see their family, they don't get to take care of their kids, pick up their kids, they don't get to take care of their aging parents, they don't get to do the other things that make them feel like complete people, because it's 10 or 11 hours wrapped up at work. And yet when they were home for the pandemic, they realized they could integrate all of those things and get their work down. There was no drop in productivity where people were home. So you got the big quit. You got people that are going like, no, I'm working at home. You've got managers that are freaking out because they can't see that their people are on videos for 8 hours. These managers want to be more proactive and they want to be more strategic, but their routine stuck in their head is that they need to micromanage and they need to make sure people are sitting at their desk. Because we measure not based upon the type of progress impacts metrics that I'm going to talk about. We measure based upon tasks done. So, as I said, technology is the easy part of the digital transformation. We know how to grow a palm tree. The hard part is operating in a digitally transformed world. The next storm is coming. Will the tree survive? So the successful digital businesses, which most big companies clamor for, right? They want to go and they want to learn the Spotify model, which is almost a running joke now. And they want to learn from Amazon, and they want to learn from Zappos, and they want to learn from Google and Facebook. And they just tend to think of technology. It's all about the technology, but it's not. The technology is, again, it's the easy part, which, again, it's hard. Like, I'm an old product manager, and I used to like show all my engineering buddies my marketecture is what I would call it. And, hey, it's just code. I mean, so yeah, it's hard, but you have smart people that know how to figure that out. I was never told it can't be done. But so in the digital business, needs to be resilient. So this is my SoCal rad business. So a resilient business is one that's firmly anchored to the shore. It's based upon their technology. It's based upon the DNA of the company. It may be dominated upon some other competitive differentiation, like even owning distribution or understanding a particular market segment deeply, or a brand that's known to dominate in a particular market. So they have all of these strengths points of strength, but then they also have to be able to bend in the wind. They have to be able to be flexible. And so how do you be flexible? Well, first you have to be aware. So the A is aware in RAD. And aware means that, hey, there's a clothing manufacturing company that I worked with, ex-Siemens guy, actually. Yeah, we noticed that the clothing factories were closing in China in late 2019, and we started going, what the heck's going on? So that was the first indication that the pandemic was coming. And they had their contingency plans up and running before the end of March 2020. You have to be aware. You have to be aware of the changes in the market conditions. You have to be aware in the changes in demographics. There's, in the US, projected to be 4 million fewer college students than pre-pandemic. So how does that change the workforce? So there's implications there for hirers, but also for the colleges themselves. You have to be able to understand the changing environments, supply chain issues, all of these things, all of those disruptions I'm talking about. You have to have people that are aware of those, and then you have to formulate new communication strategies that actually make sure that that information gets in and up the stack and across the company to people that need to know. And then again, you have to be able to react to that information. So that makes you dynamic. So those of you that are familiar with Agile can understand how those Agile principles come into play here. If you're Nokia and you're building flip phones and you've got a 5-year plan in 2005 and you're still building flip phones in 2009 or 2010, you kind of got a problem. So the way I describe the behavior, so we're getting back down to what is the behavior that's required that starts ground up, but it is everybody in the organization. My 5 E's. So empathy. That was one of those buzzwords for sure, right? So empathy is understanding your customers deeply. It's not asking them for feature requests. It's understanding the problems that they're trying to solve, the needs that you're supposedly addressing. It's understanding what their aspirations are. When I was in startups, we sold almost primarily to enterprise customers. And so it matters. All of this stuff applies to B2B as well as B2C, because you have human beings that are making those decisions. So this last company I worked for, we wanted our IT managers and IT directors to forklift out existing products and put ours in. And even though our product was way less expensive and way more powerful, that was a tough decision. What if something went wrong during the changeover? This person was out of a job. Exploration. So you have to be able to admit when you don't know. So this kind of gets to, there's a hip topic that leaders need to be more vulnerable, which I completely agree with. And one great way to be vulnerable is to admit when you don't know. The moment you admit that you don't know, you can go into learning mode. When you admit that you don't know, you're not saying like, well, we're going to continue to not know. Ironically, if you can't admit that you don't know, you do continue to operate without knowing. So you admit that you don't know, and now you can start exploring what the right solution is. And there's some things that you don't know that are complicated, and you can hire experts. And then there's other things that are complex, and the complex things don't have just one solution. So you have to make choices based upon what it is you're trying to accomplish and who are the beneficiaries. But you want to be able to bust through your assumptions. The third E is evidence. So we want decisions to be informed by data. We don't want them to make decisions for us. Decisions formed by data can lead to ethical problems. But we need to pay attention to the data. We have to cut through our own biases. It's a great way to overcome disagreements, is if a priori a group can decide upon the data that they're going to use to evaluate a decision, and then you run the experiments or you go get the data and then you adhere to what you had agreed to. But so the data becomes super important. And then it's also getting to the right metrics. So we're all focused on KPIs and OKRs and all of these things, but everybody understands what the desired outcome is. The desired outcome is more money, more users. But what are the metrics that you should be tracking that measure progress towards those desired outcomes? And the problem with the way we manage today is all of those progress metrics are task oriented, and we need to flip that into being behaviors of beneficiaries that indicate whether we're making progress. Tough thing to do, very hard for big companies. Startups do it very well. Why? Because investors, that's how investors work. I'm only giving you more money if I see that you're making progress. And I'm not going to measure progress based upon how many lines of code you wrote. The fourth E is equilibrium. Equilibrium talks about the need to balance exploration or exploit work with, well, execution and exploit work with exploration work. So there's all sorts of mythology out there in the innovation industry about this exploit versus explore, where 95% of your company is in exploit mode and they only have the ability to exploit. And then there's this little innovation group that acts like a startup and all they're doing is exploring. The model is wrong, it's damaging, and people just need to abandon it. It's just wrong. There's no startup in the world worth a grain of salt that has ever stayed in exploration mode. Exploration mode just means they didn't ever figure anything out. And uncertainty, especially with all of this endless disruption, uncertainty is rife in the explorations, in the execution side of the house. In the core business, there's always uncertainty. How are we going to grow? How are we going to hit our numbers? How are we going to increase customer satisfaction? How are we going to improve customer engagement? All of these things have uncertainty. And so when we admit that we don't know how we're going to hit our numbers, this last 5%, we go into exploration mode. Exploration makes execution more efficient. This is like my new mantra. Exploration makes execution more efficient. So the painful part is you have to take the time to schedule exploration and maybe even teach exploration. But once you do it, that's how you're going to win. That's how you're going to drive impact. And the final E is ethics. Again, it's super important in the digital age. It's way too easy for people to sit behind keyboards and write code without thinking about the implications on the user. And the safety of the user should just be paramount. That is why we're in business, is to create value for customers. And so Facebook's problem of selling diet pills to anorexics and gay therapy to the LGBTQ community, those are unethical, and it's only to drive engagement and showing people inflammatory videos that exaggerate their fears and really try to hit them in a sort of a dark emotional place. That is unethical. And so we have to build ethics into the behavior. It can't just be values on a website. And so how do we do that? Well, I've got some answers, surprisingly enough. So for all of this to work, in my opinion, everybody needs to be agile. And I don't mean everybody needs to have a uniform, rigid implementation of some of the agile frameworks, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or SAFe. You have to choose the right ones, but none of that matters if you don't adhere to the principles. And so you have to adhere to the principles of agile. And the way I describe it is, and this seems like, I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say this, like, it doesn't make sense, but I have my meerkat here because fundamentally what agile means is that you build in some period of time. And, software companies, it's often a week or 2 weeks, but it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody in the organization. There's probably some synchronicity that needs to happen. But how often should you pause your work, lift up your head like a meerkat, take in new information, and then figure out whether you should change what you're doing based upon the new information. What is that cadence? That's agile. So you got to plan the work that you're doing over some period of time. You periodically, on a regular pattern, look up from the execution work you're doing. You check in with what your beneficiaries, so that could be internal stakeholders, it could be customers, it could be internal customers. Hey, am I doing the right thing? Do you think we're going down the right path here? A lot of the checking in with beneficiaries is ignored in agile implementations. We're going to take in new information. Have any of the priorities changed? What's going on in the market? Are we seeing something fundamental? Are there supply chain issues, so we should choose different parts? We're going to seek to continue to improve our work. And based upon the new information, we're going to change what we're doing in order to improve, in order to produce high quality output. It seems like that would be difficult to argue that. But it happens on a team. The team becomes a super important component of this. And it actually is what makes remote and in office, or remote and in colo work better. Is instead of coming up with a blanket policy that everybody's got to go do this or that, it's up to the team. The self-organized team who decides how they're going to do the work and what work they're doing in order to achieve their mission determines where, when, and where it's best for everybody to get together. If one team member has a bad day, the other team members pick them up. Team members are held accountable for their work by team members, not by a micromanager. And team members, if built into the mission, you have ethical standards of behavior, the teams will reinforce that. So I really believe the team is the new unit of work, and it just should be everywhere in a company, even if the nature of one's job doesn't really require them to be on a team. You put them on a team for the social reasons and for the other things that I was mentioning. And it doesn't mean those teams have to be cross-functional. And as a matter of fact, for a large part of the company, the teams may look exactly the same after implementing this way as before. You just got to it from a different way. The way you get to it today is by purely this arbitrary organizing around function. And it makes way more sense to organize around mission. The individuals get themselves taken care of by a separate reporting mechanism that's around their function. But the function's not measuring performance. The function is helping mentor, develop the individual's career, helping them overcome, personnel issues, managing their career. It's really more of a support organization. They get their skills up leveled. They can talk to more senior people. They can start mentoring younger ones. So it creates a dynamic there that's very positive in the company. And then then they're measured also just by performance. Are they hitting their missions? Missions should be established in collaboration with whatever stakeholder is in charge. You want learning metrics to be used, and they're responsible for reporting out. The team is responsible for reporting out progress. They're not to wait for the boss to ask. They're doing it on their own. So what you get then are layers of agile teams. I call team of teams. And so at the bottom layer, you have teams that are maybe all uniform, maybe cross-functional. Cross-functional in a puzzle analogy would be different colors, perhaps. But even among those same colors, there's a diversity. And so they're going to get down from the layers of hierarchy. There's fewer layers of hierarchy in this organization, but there's still some hierarchy. They get priorities. The resource allocation is managed from above. They get investments for reaching milestones. Their performance is managed. And they get support to overcome obstacles. Obstacles could be personnel. They could be barriers, needs for expertise. Maybe they need some mentoring. And then they are reporting back up their work of high quality. They're maybe reporting on the continuous improvement measurements they're taking. New information that they get, because the eyes and ears of the company are the edge of the company in the digital world, not the center of the company. The center of the company doesn't have the information anymore. They only had the information when they knew how to produce one product that was only black. The moment it all changed, all this information comes in from the edge. So I have not seen this written up in agile implementations, that you have to put in a purposeful communications flow to make sure the information is getting back up the stack and then across to other parts of the company that need that information. They're also passing on insights from customers, ideas for future products, for adjacent markets. This is really what starts opening up longer-term growth initiatives that you're not going to get from the innovation lab. So don't get them from there. Get them from the people who already have boots on the ground, as it were, and are getting this information. And again, like I said, they're responsible for reporting progress up. That should be a standardized email. Techstars got a great example. There's even a Techstars startup that does those emails. And so the idea is reminding people of who you are. Here's my top line metrics. Here's our wins, so shining a light. And then here's the obstacles we need help overcoming. Simple email. Anybody can subscribe to it, but of course your sponsors and your beneficiaries are first in line. But it's a superhuman thing that you should all learn, is that if you don't supply information, your bosses are filling in information with the stories they tell. It's human brain. In order to store memories efficiently, human beings fill in gaps with their own imagination, and they remember them as facts, even though it was their own stories. So you give them the story, and then they have nothing more to fill in. My other favorite mantra, and I talked about this a little bit, explore in the core. This isn't about innovation, it's about innovation mindset. Exploration improves operational efficiency. You lower the risk of anything that you're working on by reducing uncertainty. So everybody always says the core is anti-risk. No, this is being anti-risk. It's risky to ignore the uncertainty. If you execute through uncertainty, you fail. This allows you to draw a straight line from work to priorities. I mean, doesn't that seem like a good idea? Right now, the way it is we're on time and under budget. Yeah, but the customers don't like it. Oh, well, that's not what you measured me by. I'm on time and under budget. It must have been sales' fault. It must have been marketing's fault. So just by the nature of the metrics we choose, we're encouraging finger pointing. Not all teams are cross-functional. It's based upon the mission. Think about an army. You have people that are formed into squads and units, and they have a small team. It's kind of a two-pizza team, but they all have pretty much uniform skills, and the battles that they fight are fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the engagements are done. That's what they're trained for. But if you have a special forces team, the special forces team is completely, people on that team are for a specific skill in order to accomplish a certain portion of the mission. There's no hierarchy on the team, on a special forces team. It's fraught with uncertainty in all sorts of levels because there's so many things that can go wrong. And the person who's in charge of a team during a particular facet is not based upon rank, it's based upon their expertise. And so that's sort of the two ends of a continuum there of how one would create agile teams. So the mission determines who works on the team. And like I mentioned before, this is the core teams working with customers, with products, are the ones that are going to come up with the product ideas. This was actually the work we did with Siemens a long time ago. Was exactly that. And so then developing the progress impact metrics. So that's what teaches the managers how to manage in an environment of uncertainty. And then we've done it a ton of times. They have the skill. The mythology around the exploit versus explore believes that managers don't have that ability. Change happens from the ground up. And so change is like a startup itself. It's hard and it takes a lot of time. And this is probably why people want to do it top down, because they can mandate it in a short period of time. But that's also why it just turns into a reorg. And it means that all the way down, managers are choosing which people they're going to let go or kick out of their teams. And so that's why you end up losing the ground level people, because they're not involved in the hierarchy of decision making. Often big consulting companies are brought in to do this. And I've talked to all the big consulting companies, and they all face the same issues internally that they are purporting to fix for these other companies. So you have to start small, focusing on a group, focusing on early adopter, just like in a startup. You don't give them a annual functional budget, so it actually requires the CFO to come up with a slightly different program or pull money out of a different bucket. You're not giving them a functional budget. You're giving them money based upon them hitting milestones in tranches, just like an investment. And we typically set up an investment board or a growth board and teach those leaders how to make those decisions. But we're measuring progress. So it's not revenue, not number of customers. It's progress towards revenue and progress towards number of customers. Shining a light on the wins. Shining a light on the wins is what creates momentum. And so though you're starting small, you want to scale those successes. But this is where it doesn't have to be a startup anymore. And at some point, what you want is the core business to see what you're doing so that they grok that they can use it too. So that they can understand that if they apply these techniques in the core, they're going to see big jumps. And that's actually going to have a real impact. So it's not about maintaining a startup the whole time. What you want to do is you want to integrate programs into the core business, because they're the ones that are going to take it and run with it. And that's actually what's going to cause the momentum. And what emerges, and it may be emerging in Siemens now based upon the stories I'm hearing about the great work their digital team is doing, that becomes the new business. And over time, old business units will be dropped into the new one, because it's the behavior. It's not really even whether it's digital or not anymore. It's about the digital behavior. It's about being able to deal with the global connectedness and the speed of information and the agility of customers. And that's going to be in all sectors, at least relative to the way it was before. So that's what I have for you. And I'm hoping you also have some questions for me. But a little bit about me. So I wrote, self-published, the first book that talked about product market fit and lean startup and customer development back in 2010, sort of what launched this new career. Steve Blank wrote the foreword to that. Eric Ries wrote the foreword to the Lean Entrepreneur, because his book just really just blew off the top of that. I started bringing the words empathy into Lean Entrepreneur when I was writing about it, because I didn't think Lean Startup really kind of got that part of it. And really took a deep dive into how to interact with customers and how to run experiments and what data to be looking at. My progress impact metrics stuff comes all the way back from that book. And then I wrote Disruption Proof last year. That was after 10 years of helping large companies. And I really started off in the innovation group. And the innovation group was not where it was at. Why is it that the innovation group isn't the one that led digital transformation? This is like the big mystery to me. Most organizations spun up a completely different group to do that. Why was that? I don't get it. Except that the innovation group wasn't focused on the right thing. But a lot of the mythology around it, your innovation lab was never going to do breakthrough innovation. And a matter of fact, I'm not sure the company needs to do breakthrough innovation. I think the era of Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation is over. Maybe it still exists in technology companies that have to invent. But most companies out there now really just need to apply technology that's already been invented. And so speed to market is super important, and understanding customers becomes super important to be able to get it right. So my heart is probably still in startups. I was in several startups in the Bay Area pre.com and post bust. I mentored at a bunch of startup organizations, started a bunch of stuff here in San Diego. But Moves the Needle was very exciting. Up into the pandemic, we had helped over 70 large organizations learn how to explore, learn how to increase their execution efficiency, improve time to market, discover new growth opportunities, launch new products. And really the key to doing it on the ground up was when we were done, 80, 90%, 95% of the people said, I never want to go back to the way I was working before, because they got to exercise their creativity and their intelligence. It's why we hire these people. And then we force them to do what they're told. And there's so many problems that need to be solved, is that we need to, in a very purposeful way, unleash them to solve problems. And so, yes, they probably need a little bit of training, but frankly, most big companies already have human-centered design people. They already have agile people that get it. They already have people that understand rapid experimentation. Maybe there's more discipline that's needed in all those. There's probably more democratization that's required in all of those, but the skills already exist. And so it's one of those things that companies can start practicing small right away to start honing their exploration muscle. And, we've been very active in Europe. We've helped some of the most innovative brands over there, including Siemens, ING, Roche, Humanetics, Mr. C there, Bayer, and Nike is always an interesting one. So thank you. That's what I got for you. I really encourage you to reach out to me, Brant@movestheneedle.com. And now we can take questions if folks have questions. Let's see if I can figure out how to stop sharing.
So, thank you very much, Brant. Thank you very much. I have a question right away.
Okay.
Because you've been tearing down some walls I had mentally, actually. And I want to ask you a question to clarify that a little bit. So, you argue that actually the whole company should be innovative, and should explore new opportunities, right? But, when I was actually, fun story. Now I come back to my studies in university. There was this book who explained, okay, we should have ambidextrous organizations, right? And that is exactly the opposite what you just told us. And I was just wondering while you're talking, so do you think that the core of innovation should come from within the company for all different types of innovation? Like we had like the different innovations, like, okay, continuous innovation, like incremental innovation, or, like on the other side, like the moonshot innovation or the huge big bets, right? So do you think everything should come from within the company? Or do you think in some cases you should have like ambidextrous organization thinking, like, like think tanks outside of the organization or stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think that whole, I'm getting a little bit of echo here. I think that whole ambidextrous organization is wrong. And I think that horizon planning has been altered, so now that it is also wrong. So I didn't say, though, that innovation has to be everywhere. I mean, people should just stop using the word innovation, to be honest. Innovation mindset needs to be everywhere, not innovation. Because nobody defines innovation. So there's nobody inside the organization that you'll get the same answer about what innovation means, or what innovation means to them, or what innovation means to the R&D group. So if nobody's going to stop and define it, nobody should use it. The innovation mindset is what exploration is. You apply exploration wherever there's uncertainty. So if you can tell me that your core business faces no uncertainty, then you don't need to do exploration. You don't have to have an innovation mindset. But that would be the first time that I'd ever seen in my life that there's no ambiguity, no uncertainty in the core business. So the core business was doing great in February 2020. COVID hit in March 2020. But they were good to go. They didn't lose their market. They could just continue to do what they did the day before, and everything was hunky-dory. That's what that's saying to me.
Interesting.
I think the other mythology is, if you work in the startup world, you know that there is no predicting whether something is incremental or breakthrough. The market decides that. Human beings don't decide that when they're sitting around a table. If there's no market for your breakthrough innovation, it was not breakthrough innovation. If there's a huge market for your incremental innovation, then it was breakthrough innovation. Attaching those to horizons also doesn't make any sense, because if you think it's a breakthrough innovation happens in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, that's completely arbitrary. Instagram did it in 2 years. So I mean, it's like it's just wrong, and it's been obviously developed by academics that never worked in startups.
All right. Who has a question? Where is the throwing microphone? Who has a question? Any questions here? Come on. Then I have a second question for you. So
come on, was I not controversial enough?
No. But I still want to explore a little bit the fine line. I try to challenge you now with this thing, because let's take self-driving car, right? So I think it would never happen if you just say, okay, the core business should innovate and have an innovative mindset, right? For certain innovations, I would assume that it's beneficial to have like a separate entity. Like also like when we talk about ambidextrous organization, it is not so much about the technology side, but it's more about the resources and the structures and the processes which don't support the new business, right? So where's the line between, okay, core business innovation and or is there some cases where you say, okay, it would be better to separate it from the core business?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a case study in my book where an insurance company let a new pet insurance company start off and act like a startup. So I think that those decisions can be made. Those decisions can be made on each one. Do people consider it strategic to the business? But I think that there's also case studies in the book. Cargill comes to mind, which is, alternative proteins are coming, and they own, meat, food, distribution. So do they have to spin up a alternative protein startup, or should they just keep an eye on it, scout technology companies, invest in startups, and then figure out what's the best way for them to win at some inflection point? Why isn't that a better way than spinning up one of their own? And I would even argue that the self-driving car is one. Like, we don't even know how far away we were. If you listen to Elon Musk's bloviating over the last 5 years, I think we're already behind, right? So and really, to be honest, I'm skeptical that we're ever going to have it as in a place where pedestrians, human-driven cars, and automated cars are on the road at the same time. I'm super skeptical. When I first heard of the automated cars, my assumption was that it'll only work when everything is automated, right? If you put out on the Autobahn where there's only automated cars, I think we could do that. But places where there's pedestrians and all these type of things. I mean, these cars can't even read street signs yet. We're a very long ways away. So should all of the automobile companies be chasing that? Or should they let independent startups go and figure that stuff out? And then they scout those startups, invest in them, maybe acquire them. The problem with telling a company that they need to go and do a startup, they need 1,000 of those to get a unicorn. I mean, an individual company can't compete against the startup ecosystem. The startup ecosystem literally has thousands of different ideas, different ways of doing it, different business models. Your innovation lab's going to compete against that? No. As a matter of fact, what's the evidence for it? So what's the evidence that they can do it? And then I want to ask, what is the evidence that they should do it? So if they don't go do breakthrough innovation and they learn how they can. So Siemens had a very complicated AutoCAD software that they sold to very large enterprises. And internally they said, like, well, I bet you we could simplify that and turn it into a SaaS product. So that's what they did. And it was a battle, I'm sure. But that incremental type of stuff is a natural extension of existing business models. You're not going to get that because you assigned the task to a lab to go think up breakthrough innovation.
Yeah. All right. Convinced. At least me. Yeah. Peter has a question.
So, hi, thanks for your talk so far. I'm wondering if we say that we have to start actually with the human being side also on innovation. If you give a hint on where to start, like I go to work on Monday again, how do I contribute to be a more innovative company then?
So what's your role?
Product management.
And are you part of a team, or you run a team? Like how's that responsibility fall down?
I'm part of a team, but I'm there as an external consultant, but I'm part of the team, yeah.
And so are you guys doing are you agile?
Definitely.
Yeah. So what I would try to do is build in, I would add items to the backlog that are to the to-do column that are exploration. And then I would convince my team that we're going to put these into a sprint. And so those could be, depending on the negotiation, it could be a whole day that's an exploration day. It could be we're going to bring customers on site and we're going to interview the customers. Or it could be that we're going to launch an experiment. And I know that a lot of companies in digital already run like split tests and that sort of thing. So I want like more bold experiments, like things that elicit customer behavior that give you insights. So my book has some of that, but also David Bland wrote a book with Alex Osterwalder that's supposed to be a really good book on running experiments. And so it's just it's a little bit more disciplined. It's not like rapid prototyping, but it's really coming up with hypothesis. If we did X, Y percentage of customers would behave in way Z, and that Z tells us something important. It's an insight. It's like it busts one of our assumptions. And so you might attach it to, like, again, I don't know what you're working on, but like what we need to do, we're signed up to increase user engagement. So you're running experiments to try to see what would improve user engagement. And it's not always a product feature that does that. It could be moving a product feature. It could be getting rid of one. It could actually be messaging better so that people's expectations are more aligned with what you're doing. So I think just building exploration into your regular sprints starts that change. You're now focused mostly on execution work, but you're building in a little bit of exploration.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, let me know if you want any free help on that. I'm happy to try to help you get launched on that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brant. And this is exactly what I meant, like since 10, 15 years you are around in this innovation ecosystem. Yeah, I saw you talking on a lot of stages over the time, and still I'm sitting here, and after the talk oh man, this teared down again a wall, and I have to think about that and read again through your book and how you see the world, and you keep innovating and changing the world in innovation. Thank you for your talk. Thank you for being here. Please give him a warm applause.
Well, thanks for having me, Thomas. And don't ever be afraid about pushing back. I only learn all of these things because I don't accept the conventional wisdom. But sometimes the conventional wisdom might be right. So it's always the dialogue that helps us improve and learn.
All right. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks.